behind the Federal Reserve were entirely responsible. But that's to say, we, the taxpayers in the enlightened West, were the ones who created Chinese Communist Party, and we created the Soviet Union and the communist threat that came out of Russia. So all of that stuff we're accountable for. And until we make amends with that psycho-intellectually and psychoculturally, make amends with the fact that it was our forebears, white skins principally in North America and the Commonwealth countries, who were entirely responsible for the abomination that we now see as being the big threat.
All right, look, there's somebody on the internet that found that somebody else on the internet was wrong. It's like a train, and everyone's attacking them, and it's like a train wreck that doesn't stop. I can't take my eyes off of it. It's fascinating. I just joined X, or rejoined, after about 14 years. Already, after about 2 days, I got 10 followers, and they're Asian-looking models, beautiful, and they only have like 2 or 3 followers each. I don't really know how to say I'm married in Asian bot, but maybe you can join me there and we can have some real conversations. All right, listen, we want to stream, but we can't stream because everyone, including you, including me, including all of my guests, everyone in the world wants uncensored content, and YouTube doesn't. So we can't stream to YouTube. So what we're doing is we're branching out. We're going to go to stream to Rumbles, Locals, and Twitter or X. Then after we live stream freely, because that's what people like to do, they like to talk freely without censoring what they say. And as I'm seeing from our guests, they can't hold back. They don't want to hold back. And I don't want them to either. So, but we have to, it's either that or edit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the live streams, go elsewhere, and we're going to come back to YouTube for the clips and just to, for some special moments, I guess. All right, so more updates on that as we go. Now, this week we have Sacha Stone on. And so if you don't know Sacha Stone, you got to follow this video, watch it entirely. It goes in so many different directions. It's fascinating. And I only had to edit out 25% of it.
Well, Rhodesia, as you may know from history, was the discovery of the possibly not so great Cecil John Rhodes, who was carving empire down the spine of Africa at the behest of Victoriana. So the great Victorian era, he was really one of those masons, midnight masons, who was carving that straight line down Africa on behalf of the De Beers and the Oppenheimers and the rest of them. So the ultimate conquest was Rhodesia, which he founded and then was named after him, which is a small landlocked country, but without any doubt, the most beautiful country on earth. Wow. All explorers said that back in the day, Stanley Livingstone, all of them, they all said, wow, well, this is it. This is God's country. But incredibly rich in resources, coal and diamonds and gold and all the rest of it. So Rhodesia was really the conquest of the British Empire. And then in 1965, before I was born, the Rhodesians, the small white Rhodesian population, declared independence against the crown, showing real, predictive verve. We were ahead of the time, wanting to secede from the crown of England and all that bullshit. And we did. And we pulled out our guns and told the crown to back off, which it had no choice. And of course, that led to becoming enmatized by the globalists. So Rhodesia became sanctioned by the entire global community, which was driven by the Crown of England, still is to this day. And we ended up having to circle the wagons and defend our lives. We had very small population. And the Rhodesia became the kind of checkerboard of the Cold War in Africa, those big forces playing out to try to gain dominion over Africa, because Rhodesia was the wellspring of the wealth of Africa in a sense. And that was I was born into that in the war and lived throughout that, and living behind grenade screens and traveling in convoys, and that was my life, my childhood. And at the end of it, we couldn't sustain beyond a certain point, and we had to cave, and the globalists won, I guess. And Robert Mugabe came in, and we all know about Robert Mugabe. So Rhodesia turned from being the richest country possibly on earth for GDP to the poorest country on earth, which is why the Zimbabwe, it was then turned into Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe and the Zim note, as we all know, is the most devalued currency on the face of the earth. So there's a nice bit of counterpoint geometry playing out there. But the resurrection.
Yeah, really quick. Why do you think the globalists are so interested in Africa and keeping it impoverished?
For a host of reasons which tiptoe into the esoteric. So I'll go there without apology. In the first instance, Africa is a lot bigger than you think Africa is. So if you went to school anywhere in the world between now and between 1950 up until 1952, the real history of the world was more or less available. But it became something which was impossible. Forgive me, I'm just going to change the angle of light. I've got sun in my eyes. 1952, the British installed a software which desecrated the true history of the world. And that installation of the British curriculum worldwide has really ended our true capacity to know the truth about who we are, what we were, north, south, east, west. I'll tell you that Africa is a vast continent, at least 3 times bigger than you think it is. So you have to look at the Mercator map and understand how mapping was done back in the day. But the map that you look at and the children look at in the classroom bears no relationship to it proportionately to the size of Africa compared to America, Canada, the rest of the world. You can fit the whole of China, North America, Europe into Africa. It is a vast continent in real scale, real time. So you're talking about, in a sense, the biggest reserve of natural resources, minerals, gold, diamonds, everything you can shake a stick at. And that, of course, has always been the essential pillar upon which any economy stands. So that's the answer to you. If owning Africa, owning the mining rights, owning the land, being able to collateralize Africa into bonds, human souls, Africans themselves and their land, through tabulations and registrations, that becomes a massive underpinning of this false light global economy.
I'd like to jump in
there now.
Go ahead, John.
Isn't China trying to infiltrate?
Well, so China began when I was doing my diplomatic work over 2 decades ago in Africa, because I left Africa at 16 or 17, was essentially a refugee for about 9 or 10 years, till I was finally granted a passport by the British. But I went back in 1999. I went back and started living in Morocco when I retired, when I was ejected from the music industry because I wouldn't sign the contract. I went back to Africa, to Morocco and Egypt, and lived between Morocco and Egypt for about 3 years, and started my peace foundation, Humanitad. And so I was doing some high-end, I say high-end, meaning to say high access. I was able to access leadership at that time, and as I still do today. But I spent 5 or 6 years doing diplomacy work, going around meeting with leaders. And I'll tell you what, in Africa, at that time, 1999, I was sitting down with plenipotentiaries and ambassadors and some of the African leaders. And they were saying, my God, China's just coming and knocking on the door and offering us $1 billion, $1 billion, $1 billion. So back in the day, that was really cheap. China was super smart. So 20 plus years ago, China went in with a small budget of, 50B, 100B, and bought out Africa when it was absolutely bankrupted and picked up the concessions, the infrastructural concessions to build bridges and roads and infrastructure, which the net is that Africa feeds China. So it was a very smart trade-off that was done over 20 years ago. Be sure about that.
Oh, they're very strategic.
Yes.
They're getting their pillars in everywhere.
Yeah.
Greg?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
And
Sacha,
let me just say something that I have to do on a point of honor.
Yeah.
Every time China gets raised, on a point of honor, I have got to say a couple of things. One, China today is the construct, the devise of Wall Street, which is to say the Crown of England and the Vatican. So be clear about that. We want to shake a finger at China, the Communist Party. We invented it. We created it. We installed that godless software. We financed with our tax dollars, our grandparents financed Trotsky, Marx, and Stalin, and the Stalin purges and the massacres that came. We are entirely responsible for toppling the Romanov dynasty back in the day, the turn of last century, arguably the most noble bloodline in the history of the world. We toppled that. The Khazarian mob, the mafia behind the Federal Reserve were entirely responsible. But that's to say, we, the taxpayers in the enlightened West, were the ones who created Chinese Communist Party, and we created the Soviet Union and the communist threat that came out of Russia. So all of that stuff we're accountable for. And until we make amends with that psycho-intellectually and psychoculturally, make amends with the fact that it was our forebears, white skins principally in North America and the Commonwealth countries, who were entirely responsible for the abomination that we now see as being the big threat. We designed it.
I'm just curious if I could go back a step, Sacha. You were saying that we know that you were born in Rhodesia, and I assume, well, you talked about the globalists, and I know how you feel about globalists. So two questions. First of all, did you develop your current opinion of globalists while you were still young? And then second of all, how did your parents end up in Rhodesia? You're obviously not a native to that. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd like to know a little bit more about your family's history.
Sure. Well, it was my grandfather was the one who made the foray there early last century and ended up in Rhodesia. He was, excuse me, a bit of an empire builder. And no, he was not Lord Rockefeller or whatever. I've read these things on the web that I'm a Rockefeller. I wish. But no, not that. My father left pretty much around about the time when I was born, and moved to the United Kingdom because my parents divorced, and I stayed on with my mother. So I'm in that sense, I'm third generation only. My grandfather and my grandfather on both sides were in Rhodesia at that time in the 50s and 60s. And that was really the connection to Africa. Of course, we hail from Scotland, essentially, and England on both sides of my familial coin.
Okay. And then I would like you to talk a little bit about how you came to have the beliefs you have today about globalists. And was that something you developed when you were young or later on?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, I get quite acerbic on the subject of globalism because, like most fools, I was suckered into an idea 20 plus years ago when I was younger and more idealistic. And was certainly when I was starting my Peace Foundation, Humanitarian, in 1999. At that time, I was very green around the gills, and I thought, the sign off on my letterheads and my logos and my websites was, humanitarian, one world, one humanity, and at that time I was conducting this diplomatic work and reaching out to the Henry Kissingers of this world and the Nelson Mandelas and the Dalai Lamas and meeting with the great and the good and the not so good, and trying to harmonize and create a foundation that could just broker peace through culture and interfaith and intercultural initiatives. That was my remit for myself, which was a very kind of reductive one, but so I was all about one world, one humanity. And then I started to see how the reason why many of these forces were going, oh, there's a good young kid. Let's back him up. Let's give him support and open doors for him. And, I started to realize the globalists, the hegemonialists, were the ones who were also talking up one world, one humanity, but they were not doing it for the right reasons. They were not about unity consciousness. They were about monoculturalism, about eradicating culture and society and community and family and even gender today, right? That's the Sabbatean, I would even say satanic logic that prevails today in the liberal intellectual West, is an offshoot of that globalist agenda, which pretends at unity, but is nothing to do with unity. It's everything to do with separation. So I learned that after a few years and made the separation in my own mind. But for me now, I will talk in terms of unity consciousness, but I don't talk in terms of one world, one humanity anymore, because the syntax has had to evolve and grow up. I've despised the globalist agenda since I realized and recognized that this Borg-like creature only ever seeks to assimilate and desecrate all that is goodly and godly in human expression. And then you trail it and you look at it and you study it and you study the anthropological, anthroposophical, intellectual, historical, all of these perspectives, even geological perspectives. I mean, I'm looking out there at the red rocks of Sedona. What are they? Well, I'm speaking to very significant scientists who are telling me categorically that the forensics indicate, the huge mineral deposits from mining excavation, detritus from ancient galactic mining, undertakings, perfectly likely. But the point I'm making is that globalism desecrates anything that is righteous and goodly and godly. And that's why I've moved against it. Now, in 2009, I was inveigled into the United Nations, and I was wooed for many months by ambassadors and some good folk, I have to say, who said, look, we understand that you're very against the UN, and so are we from within inside. We can see what's happening and we're terrified. And we need a muscle like you in the NGO community to help come in and stir up the pot. And I felt that argument was compelling. At a certain point, I thought, well, okay, that makes sense. I am pretty fearless at that. I'm happy to wear a balaclava and do a leopard crawl into the basement of the UN and get a security clearance, so to speak. And I did. I said, I don't want coin. I never took a dime. I will never receive coin from an institution like that. So I didn't take any salary, but I did eventually become a director general the following year in 2010, when the secretary general at that point in the renewable energy sector and innovative technology sector approached me and said, look, your own foundation, Humanitat, is doing so much to promote and promulgate breakthrough energy and technology and 0 point this and blah, blah, blah. Sustainability, the great catchword. And he said, can you come in and shake up the game in the UN? And I said, yeah, but only if I can control my portfolio. I do not want an office in the UN and I don't want a salary. And no one looks over my shoulder and tells me what to do. And I was given that special dispensation. So I set up my office largely in the Benjamin Hotel next to the UN in New York, paid for by myself. And I began work. I began setting up an initiative. In the course of 2010, I spent that year working on setting up what I believe would become a historic initiative called the EZ initiative, the Exemplar Zero initiative. And using my station as a director general, what I did was reached out to the Gulf states, the 5 Gulf states, and said to them, I want $1 billion each, to the rulers. I want a $5 billion fund. I want to call it the Easy Gift, the Exemplar Zero Global Infrastructure Finance Trust. And I want you people to be the ones who gift the $5 billion in. This is the quid pro quo. I will work with my economics policy unit and my technology innovation group. I will incubate breakthrough, innovative, sustainable, regenerative technologies, and you guys will get first dibs in the industry sector. So the back door will go straight to you, and you, the Gulf states, will become responsible for a true green revolution in the next 5 to 10 years. Brilliant idea, as far as I'm concerned. They loved it. They wanted to sign up to it. And 10 days before I was due to host a summit in Kuwait City, the EZ Summit, where I had world leaders flying in and looking in, and energy ministers and finance ministers coming in, and we were going to crack the nut on that day, and we were going to open this to the world and create this incredible beacon of light to engineers and scientists and innovators to say, come, you've got the solutions to remediate oil spills. You've got the solutions to remediate depleted uranium in the atmosphere. You've got the solutions to do this, this, and this. Bring them forward. We'll finance you, take you to market. That's how idiotic I was. That's how green and naive.
What year was this?
This was in 2010. So 10 days before the EASY summit in Kuwait City, there's a dawn raid on my office and my staff are arrested. They think that I'm there. I'm not. I'm in London. Well, put it this way. I called a couple of the highest ranking political figures, motherfucker, to their face over the telephone with a translator, because I saw what had happened, that these people had set me up. Elements within, let's just say, these countries, coupled with elements within the top brass of the United Nations. Let's leave it at that. This is the Sabbatean technocracy I refer to subsequently. I know how power works. I understand the power pyramid, and it is not the capstone that is the problem. Never was. The Queen of England is never the problem. Until you get to the Jesuits, with the superior general or the Black Pope is absolutely the problem. But I'm saying that in most of the constructs of power, there's a separation between the capstone and the body politic. There is a little sliver between the capstone and the body politic, and that is where this Jesuitical Sabbatean element is installed that controls both sides of the equation. It's clever stuff. It's clever geometry, and curiously enough, that tethers back to Cecil John Rhodes and the round tables that he established back in the day, in the Victorian era. And that was clever. That was how to infiltrate the portals of power, by setting up a committee in the Royal Geological Society, let's say. He set up a committee. It's a Rhodes round table. And two of the men in that committee of 20, 30, 40 people, two of the men have an agenda, which is fed to them by, in this case, the Jesuitical Sabbatean element. And those two members of that committee start a campaign of festering and fostering and incubating antipathy and acrimony between the different members. They literally start, whispering in people's ears, oh, don't trust so-and-so. We heard him say this or do that. So that kind of Jesuitical devise infiltrates committees and creates dissent, foments dissent, and then creates an agenda and drives the agenda. Only two members of a committee need to know what the agenda is to be able to drive it forward. That's how stupid humans are. We're so prone to gossip and to falling victim to gossip. So that was the Rhodes Roundtable method that infiltrated the League of Nations, the United Nations, the IMF, the BIS, all of these institutions that on the face of it have a fairly decent remit. And yet, look at what they do. And so it goes on and on. I mean, I could literally roll on for hours.
Yeah, you have a lot of information. I'd like to unpack one particular area, but particularly the Jesuits. Right before that, when they raided your business or your office, what were the grounds? Did they claim fraud or something?
It's a great question, and thank you for pulling me back on script. What was told to me?
What script?
Right. No, but pulling me back on, fair enough. But the point being, what I was told at the time was, you have breached international protocol or some bullshit like that was told to me. I think it was the Prime Minister's office that I was screeching at that day. And I said, what protocol are you talking about? They said, well, you've invited heads of state to our soil, and that can only happen through our State Department, so to speak. I said, well, I told you, and I told your leadership that I was going to do this summit and invite world leaders, and you gave me the sanction, the red light to do so. I'm going ahead and producing the event. I'm inviting them. I'm the Director General, for God's sake, of the Intergovernmental Renewable Energy sector. It's my function to invite them. And if you people aren't picking up on the protocols or on educating my people on the ground sufficiently, that's on you. But you don't end a summit that's happening in 10 days' time and cause catastrophic failure of this huge reveal that's going to happen for the world, unless you've got an agenda and you're in on it, which is to destroy the bedrock of a free energy revolution. So that was the end of that. You can't argue with powers and forces beyond a certain point. But what I did do was pull out my credit card, pull a group of my trusted team around me. And we did 10 days later host the EZ Summit in United Nations Millennium Plaza in New York. And some good leaders backed us up, but it was a fail because ultimately because the Gulf states withdrew from the finance trust, or we had the wind knocked out of our sails by the UN. So I resigned at that point, pulled out. In fact, I didn't even resign. I think I forced the Secretary General to sack me, because if I'd resigned, I would have had to leave my intellectual property behind. But in being dismissed, I didn't. So I wrote a very rude, acerbic letter to him, telling me exactly what I thought of how I believed he had helped to preside over the catastrophic failure of the summit. And that was the end of my involvement with the United Nations. And that was the end of 2010.
And now it's woken you up to recognizing some of the powers that be, though. Is that correct?
Dr. David Martin, who's now making great waves in the world, if you know who Dr. David Martin is, was working with me on that, just so you know. And he was heading up the economics policy unit of the Global Infrastructure Finance Trust. I brought him in to do that. Very, very brilliant man. And maybe at some point this year, he and I'll get together and tell the truth story about what happened at that time, because it's such a poignant cameo of how good humans. Doesn't matter how many PhDs you hold, how brilliant you are. If you think you can hack in those days, if you thought you could hack into the corridors of power without being one of those midnight Masons, without being invited in to the back room, good luck, sunshine.
Yeah. And that reminds me, I'm awfully glad that you're not a Rockefeller. I just want to point that out. I know you'd like to have the money, but
well, no, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't touch the money. And curiously enough, I've met with members of the Rockefeller family and the Rothschilds and the DuPonts and all of these other kind of extended Black nobility bloodlines. I variously hobnobbed with them over 25, 30 years, in fact, going back to when I was in the cut and thrust of my rock and roll nonsense. And in those days, I was also partying with princes and, and aristocrats. And it's just been since I was in my late teens, a refugee in London, in England, and I got into the kind of the aristocracy. I was at that point when I was very young, I was set myself up as an interior designer. I was painting Trompe l'oeil paintings and doing sculptures, and I was very pretty, and I was a bit of an item. And so I was being passed around to do interior design stuff. In fact, there was an article on me, center page article in the Sunday Times back in the day, which is quite embarrassing to look back on. But I was getting a name for myself as being this kind of flamboyant creature doing exotic interior designs and designing restaurants and clubs and private homes. I was making money in order to finance my own music. I didn't, I wanted to do it myself. But I got pulled into kind of aristocratic circles when I was doing that as a function in life, and I met with so many of them and found them delightfully corrupt and delightfully,
delightfully corrupt.
They were out there. And, what I was learning with them, hanging with those kind of aristocrats and being invited to those parties. And what I started to see was that there would be a mafia boss sitting in the corner there with shades on and a silver cane. And then a high court judge over there having cognac with Lord so-and-so. I started to see, motherfuckers, they're all in it together. So again, I started to see that side of the power play, which is the fun side of it, when I was very young. And that's also why when I got involved in rock and roll, and I was connected to these royal houses, and the prince of this and the princess of that were kind of friends, fans, whatever, connected to my rock and roll thing that was going on at the time, turning up at my gigs and what have you. When I did pull out of music, I had access to those young royals and said, hey, can your daddy maybe connect me with Nelson Mandela, and then Nelson Mandela asked me, can you connect me with so-and-so? So that's all I was doing, was hustling in the best way, the only way one can, to build a thing. And that's how I got pulled into that world. And then, as I said, 5 years into my diplomatic work, I started to realize about the complete fiction of power. And that's why I'm not in any thrall. I've sat down with so many kings, so many queens, sultans, rajas, imams, bishops, popes, you name it. I've got literally 1,000 photographs that I can show. In fact, yesterday on stage I thought just for fun at the theater here in Sedona, with the wonderful Freddie Silver and Randall Carlson, who did one of the biggest Joe Rogan blogs not so long ago, famous for that. And a couple of other great speakers. I decided to do a little bit of an unveil of my past, and so I threw up photographs, about 30 or 40 images of me, with some of these world leaders.
Wow.
Never normally put out there. Because I've also seen on the web these stories emerging that I'm a great fantasist and bullshit artist and completely inventing my reality. I mean, fuck you. No, I actually walked the walk, damn it, and dodged a lot of bullets in doing so. But yeah, it's all fun. It's all great fun. But power is a myth. So when I sit down with a president or a prime minister or a king or a queen or a sultan or a raja, I am looking at somebody who shits and wipes their ass and sometimes gets it wrong. So I'm not remotely enthralled to power. I regard all temporal power as being an extension of the false light matrix.
All right, question. Well, this is good stuff. All right, I want to go way back to your music, the beginning. Were you a musician in Africa, or once you came to UK, or how did that work out?
Not
I'll
in
go way
Africa.
back. I want to go back. You called it nonsense, so that's the area I want to explore.
Well, I wasn't in Africa. I was too young to be a musician there. I keyed into that. Yeah, when I hit England and decided that I was going to become a musician. And yeah, no, that was definitely late.
Do you write your own music? Do you write your own lyrics? You've certainly got a way of words, so you must be a good
did. Well, I
lyricist.
tell you what, we did. I'm a writer, so I compose, write. I'm a lousy guitarist, but I'm competent to compose on it. I'm a lousy keyboardist, but I'm competent to compose on it. And I wrote my own stuff, and we put out a few albums, and it was great. The Stone Band was a kind of revolving door band with different players from big bands that would come in variously and conform. And for 9 years, that was my life, and we were an independent. So we were a big sound. It was a stadium rock, big sound band. And but my problem was I wasn't allowed to travel very extensively because I was technically a refugee and didn't have a passport. So
you lived in England.
He was a refugee in England, yeah.
I was based in the UK. All I'm going to say is there were certain forces that were non-governmental that were able to help ameliorate that. And we did do some traveling and touring, despite the fact that technically I couldn't get on planes and get
Black market touring. I like it. Can I share one of the songs?
Oh, you're more than welcome.
All right. Did you write the lyrics and the music for Metrodome? How'd that song come about?
Yes, of course. Yes,
I like it a lot. All right. Let me see. Get this right here. Let me know if you can hear it. Do you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
wow.
Nice. That's nice. John, what do you think of that? Isn't that cool?
I like it. What year was this?
That's what I was going to ask.
I can't remember for the life of me, but I that's a bootleg because I withdrew all music. I own all the copyrights. I pulled everything off.
Oh,
It was before the web really kicked off, 1999-ish, 2000.
why did you do that?
Because I wanted to make a complete, I mean, that is the least of the tracks we did. I mean, we did put out some really good stuff. And I'm thinking maybe I'm going to re-release it. I'll speak to
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Wow.
I mean, what a great line. I'm sorry. I'm a decent poet that, and if I gagged you down and bagged you down and quoted Blake until the sunset dragged you down. That's a good line. That's a good
There's a
line.
lot. There's a lot. It's on par with anything in the 80s. It's definitely 80s. It's on par easy with anything in the 80s. So something else
Well,
must
no,
have
90s.
happened.
You've got your
Yeah,
genre
it
wrong.
felt like
Okay,
mid-90s.
the video
Yeah.
looked more like 90s, but it sounded a little bit more like Motley Crue from the.
Well,
a little
curiously
bit. It's kind
enough,
of, yeah, go ahead.
so the members there that I just saw in that lineup were Benjamin Reed, the third from Ted Nugent's band,
Oh,
Gary Leaderman
nice.
from the Iron Maiden stable,
Wow.
Chris Webber from Guns N' Roses and LA Guns, and Luis de Almeida, who's the greatest flamenco guitarist I've known. So that was that particular lineup that I was just looking at. Nice
So
for
the-
me to read that.
So the Stone Band was a little bit like Steely Dan. It's just like they had all these really awesome studio musicians, and they never had the same lineup for two songs.
Yeah, every album was a different one. I'm the only constant theme, and yeah,
Nice.
they were all very credit worthy and great musicians. Yeah,
Wow.
Where'd you record that?
I have no idea, but I know that Sachi and Sachi made that particular video.
Okay.
Ali Nur Vela de Dioglu, brilliant guy. I can't remember the dates. I'm afraid of any of that. It's just an
That's
old
okay.
life, and I zipped it up and walked away. I really did.
Wow. So that's the elephant in the room. Why did you leave music? I mean, most of
Yeah.
the musicians I know of, I mean, they're doing it until they're 80. I mean, they just keep doing it and they bring back the old hits, and it's like, oh, there they are again. You
Greg,
left.
the
That's
truth-
weird. It's
Greg,
Is there
different
some
than-
is there some pain? Is there some pain associated with that? I mean, if somebody walks away from music and completely block it out and consider it a nonsense part of their life,
Or
there
did
must
you
have been
want to
some pain.
reinvent yourself and not be known for that?
All right,
So
there's three questions
so-
for you.
it's good. It's all good. I can navigate that. The thing is this, no, there's no pain attached.
Okay.
I don't see pain in life. I absolve it on a daily minute by minute basis. And if we don't survive in this particular journey. But I'm saddened by it because the truth is I've not even ever sat down with any of the guys in even the last lineup of the band. I never actually sat down with them and told them what happened fully. But the fact of the matter is I was pulled in to do the Devil's Contract.
Okay.
And part of the Devil's one fine day, I was told I had to meet a person X who was
Right.
coming and meeting with me, and I would have to attend. And it was a dinner meeting, and I was told in that dinner by this very charming devil how it was going to play. That the following day I would have to present myself at an office in Mayfair and sign papers. And within 6 months, I would be a household name. I was going to be tethered to the Aerosmith tour in Europe and then go back to America with them on the back end of them, open for them. And they were going to be breaking me on the radio airwaves in the United States. Within 6 months, I'd be a household name.
And you'd have to
Caveat
sell your
being-
soul to do it.
Yeah, well, the caveat was also that I had to lose my management, and I had my own management company, and I love my management. I had to also lose the band and not be a band. They wanted me to be a solo artist. They wanted to turn me into a kind of hard rock David Bowie type archetypal icon. And clearly they'd planned the whole fucking thing out, and it wrenched my guts out of my belly because I knew that I never wanted to be a pop star or pop rock icon. That to me was anathema. I always wanted to just hide my primal scream inside a band, albeit driving it, but I wanted to hide behind the band. I was very nervous of coming out in public. I could never do public speaking. Those days, my biggest fear was public speaking. I could play to 20 people. That wasn't a problem because it's an act. You play acting, in rock and roll. But the idea of, doing what I do today, this was absolutely off the table. I would never have dreamt I'd have the balls to ever public speak because I was terrified of that. I was very shy. And the idea of losing my band, losing my management, and then being taken on by this machine, and then also this underlying threat that came to me, which is that this is the way it's going to be, son.
Question about that. Why didn't you just say, okay, well, I don't want your contract. I just want a band and keep doing it.
Because I'd been financing, we were self-financing. So we had our
Uh-huh.
own label, our own publishing company, our own merchandising,
Hmm.
and our own management. We were distributed by a major big, and we were given radio play and MTV status. But the point is that meeting that night, I was pretty much told there is no distribution, no MTV, no radio play unless you do what you're told. And that was the end of it. That was the sword of Damocles. So I went home knowing that if I didn't go the following morning and sign those papers and hand myself over, I didn't know about the ritual satanic stuff and the fact I'd probably get, buggered in Hollywood somewhere by some. I didn't know about that stuff at the time, but I did know the threat. The threat was this is the way it's going to be.
So you dodged a
Or,
bullet.
or walk away. Walk
Well,
away.
really quick. Do want to hear your question, John? But quick question I have is in the '90s. I mean, independent recording was kind of a thing. Already at that point, like I said, Alice Cooper and some other people were doing it. They still had their labels, but people came to them, but they governed how it went. Do you feel you were deceived and you thought that it was either them or nothing? Because I think this happens to a lot of people still today. They think they need this industry to get them fame when the fame came from something you did, not what they did.
Jeff,
Yeah.
this was late 90s.
Yeah, late 90s. Okay, so even more recent.
I'm not a product of the 80s. This is the late 90s.
Okay.
And the point being that we were very novel at that time. Like we had our own thing going. Like if I did a show, Lennox Lewis, heavyweight champion of the world, would turn up, and the Crown Prince of Jordan would turn up, and the Princes of Abu Dhabi would turn up, and celebrities would. We had our own shtick going, and we had a thing going. It was like I didn't have a choice. We didn't have the money to be able to take ourselves on a big tour. We could
Right.
manage small stuff and put out our albums and going to the studio. We could do that kind of thing. But until you fed it, we would have A&R people coming to our gigs, and I would literally have them thrown out. So I'd say to my guys, find out whoever's A&R, whether it's Warner's or Arista or wherever the fuck they're, just escort them and get them out. I don't want these vapid pieces of shit coming in, because I'd sat through enough meetings with A&R guys to know how venal the music biz was, that these guys, coke snorting A&R guys, would come in 5 years younger than me, kids, and they would be the proxies telling us which songs to select and which. Get out of here. So I just had this complete vitriol towards being managed or controlled or handled, which has always been my thing. So yeah, I just think I was the wrong animal. And that's really why I had to fall on my sword at the end of the day. But I can tell you there was a threat, and the threat was, this is the way it's going to be, or walk away.
I understand. Okay, there was a real threat. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting to. Very good. John, you had a
Because
question.
if you don't have the radio play, Jeff, if you don't have the radio play or the MTV play, and don't ask me what these thumbs up are on this happens on my screen all the time. Someone's hacked it. But these icons jump up on my screen in the middle of the most.
It's coming up at the right times.
Zoom
Without
AI
radio
agrees
and
with you.
TV, you're not gonna get people to a gig, to a concert, to sustain yourself if you're blacklisted from radio and from MTV in those days.
Okay.
So I'm curious,
go
you
ahead.
mentioned some big names who were working with you. Were any of those people, had they signed contracts? Were they all totally
They were all
free agents?
contract. That I do know.
They were all variously guns. I mean,
So they would have to
leave.
leave you too then, if they were under some obligation to somebody.
No, those guys were all kind of hired guns. Those were guys who were very established in the music biz in their way, and they would move around. They liked my sound, liked what I was doing. We got it together, did an album, did a tour, whatever. But it wasn't organized in a normal way. I know that after the Stone ban, I know that it became the thing, as Jeff alluded a moment ago. It became the thing to become an independent after my era. And then you started seeing these big guys saying, fuck it, we're going to control
everyone.
guys, and we're going to control this. Yeah.
Wow, what a mess. But today, I think it's different for musicians. You really don't need to go to the industry. John and I worked for a company for a short while that was affiliated with the 5 major record labels and MTV. And that industry basically governed everything. It was kind of the time of Napster and all that, where everything was trying to break off to be independent. Now it's completely independent if you want it to. The people are taking, putting on the contracts, they're getting money, the record companies getting money from the live performances. That was never a thing back in the day. So it's completely different industry. And anyone that falls for this today, I mean, they're very deceived, very young people, very green, because there's no reason for it. You can totally make your own career in the industry now. I'm
Jeffrey,
convinced of
look
it.
at Puff Daddy today. Look at what's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
Look at Clive. Look at Clive Black. Look at these other innocuous, I mean, not sorry, innocuous, egregious creatures that used to run the music business. Clive Black is no saint. He is not a nice creature. He might be in his early 90s right now. That is a nasty piece of work. And there are a number of characters like that who are very dark, very egregious, very nefarious, that were absolutely alpha omega governing the music business back in the 80s and the 90s and possibly into the 2000s until this new independent thing really gathered its own momentum courtesy of social media.
So do you maintain contact with all these musician friends you have? And do you have any desire to get back into it at all in any way, like just as a composer?
I'll tell you that about I don't know, about 10 years ago, I was approached by a promoter who said they wanted me to reform the Stone Band for a huge amount of money and come to Russia and headline the Moscow Festival of Speed or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but it was like, it was a lot of money, like more money in one gig than we probably generated in a year back in the day. And I thought, oh God. And I almost picked up the phone and reached out to some of the guys to say, and I thought, no, Stone, pull yourself together. You don't do this for money. Besides which, I would have embarrassed myself. I mean, the kind of vocalizing that I did was very hard and very raunchy, and it would tear my throat out now to try and sing unless I had 6 months of warm up. So I thought, no, fall on your sword and walk away. But I've thought about doing a kind of Leonard Cohen thing because I'm a poet at heart.
Yes.
More than anything,
Carry it on
I'm a
to your
poet.
retirement. That's what musicians need to be doing. Exactly.
And-
Find a new style. Just carry it on into the twilight years. That's what I think.
But I still regard myself as in the cut and thrust. I still regard myself as tremendously sexually charismatic. And,
I totally agree with that one.
you're supposed to talk more.
I
But
don't
the
have an
point is,
opinion.
I don't feel old. I actually feel I'm in my prime. So it's crazy that I'm not actually jumping on a stage now.
No, but you could do something raw and still kind of strike the heart and don't throw your back out at the same time. There are ways to do it. Well, okay, so you got a lot of things going on, but John, you had another question about that. I want to make sure that you asked it if you had something.
It was pretty much answered. I wanted to just reiterate. Even in the '90s, independent was hard to break through. It was in its infancy, and even now, even if you try it now, there's only so much you can do. It's a difficult way.
Yeah,
to go.
but you could. All right, I agree.
You can
so if
do
you're
it,
trying to break into the
but
industry,
how-
yes.
how
But if you're
it could
trying to
be
break into the
minute,
hearts of
if you're
people,
one-
just do it.
depending on what your goal and audience reach is, it's still hard.
You know, there's a certain rock and roll thing with truth and disclosure and frontline activism. I mean, Van Morrison, the great Van Morrison, reached out to me on the eve of my my tour, Arise Resurrection tour that I did in the United States in 2021. This was just to come out after the COVID lockdowns and really blitzkrieg through America, Middle America, and galvanize the top advocates and for liberty and freedom and truth and disclosure, which I did with Robert David Steele, the former CIA guy, and it was it was a big thing that we did. It was meaningful. That Arise Resurrection tour. It was a shit show as well, but on the eve of doing that, and it was a brave thing to do at that time, and it got 6 people on our tour killed. So it's not a joke. It's no joke. It's no laughing matter. It was serious, and we knew it was dangerous. But on the eve of that tour, before I left Bali and flew to the United States to start the tour, Van Morrison reached out to me, and I had maybe an hour on the phone with him on a Skype call. And he was incredibly kind to me, and he bigged me up and said, you know, you're my hero, and you know, we love you, and we watch everything you do. And I've never met the guy. I did once many years ago, but he would never remember that in the flesh. And he basically really bigged me up and said, you know, do what you do. It's rock and roll. It's frontline. It's beautiful. It's meaningful. And I walk away with that and thought, yeah, you're right. You know, there I'm talking to one of the great legends, and he's telling me I'm rock and roll. You know, and I'm not known for rock and roll. No one knows on it. If there's any allusion to my music, it's always a piss take. It's someone throwing a rock at me and saying, oh, he's a failed musician turned truther because he couldn't hack in the music business. Of course, that kind of nasty shit happens. No, we were a world-class stadium rock band, and you know, we were really good. But I had to walk away from that, and I find myself now completely lost to music, to song, to lyric. But I've found it in a different way, and the muse comes to me. You know, if I'm standing on a stage, I don't need to be scripted. I'm one of the few people that doesn't need to be scripted. I can stand on a stage and talk for 3 hours, and it will make sense in the end to people of truth and people of honor. So I know I've got the muse with me, and it never left me. In that sense, it just changed shape, you know.
Yeah, it makes sense. I totally understand it. And like I said, you do have a lot of important things you're working on, and rock and roll in the end is well, it's a means to express yourself, but it's also to connect to the world and get your point across and reach the masses. You're still doing it, so you're still rock and roll. But there was something that you did. Can you tell me a little bit about the New Earth Project and what year that was? Yeah.
Happily, brother. That's why I'm here in the US right now.
Okay.
I'm doing a social tour. It's not a working tour. I'm not allowed to work in the US. I don't work in the US. But I'm doing a social tour just amongst my smaller community, which is connected to the Lazarus Initiative. I launched the Lazarus Initiative, or the Lazarus Symposium, also on the eve of my leaving Bali and going on the Arise tour, as a once-a-month symposium, and a journal that we put out, and a symposium that's once a month, lasts about 7 or 8 hours. And I bring together some of the world's greatest scientists and mathematicians and physicists and hyperdimensional physicists and archaeocosmologists and cosmogenicists. I mean, incredible minds. I bring them together, and we pierce the veil, or we lean really hard into it to really inquire about the nature of reality and so on. It's kind of like the esoteric end of the truth and disclosure movement. And because my mind works that way, I'm very interested in the hyperdimensional physics behind what we perceive as reality. And as you know, Greg knows, because we've been blessed with Greg's voice and presence. But the point being that I launched that initiative, the Lazarus Initiative, in order to really be the vanguard of inquiry in these esoteric sciences. And I'm here now just to meet that community and to cross America, 10 or 12 states only for this tour. I'll come back in August, September and do a bigger one. But what I'm doing is I'm gathering information from thousands of people that are connected to my community, because I'm launching at the end of this tour, on the last day, I'm launching, unveiling, I'm doing a big reveal, which is the New Earth Nation. So it's taken me 11 years since I launched the New Earth Project in 2013. It's taken me 11 years to experiment and to tweak and to understand the model of zero-point economics, zero-point social ecology, how we can and must now claim the allodial titles, how we must rescind, redact, revoke, retract all of the invisible contracts with this witchery called government, which is a fiction. As I said earlier in this conversation, I'm the one man, feet planted firmly in the red soil, who knows about power, can look at it in the eye and walk through it, because I understand the fiction of it. I'm not enthralled by any of it. I'm not afraid of any of it. I've sat down with too many immensely powerful people, and the most powerful people that I sit down with are not presidents and prime ministers or kings. They are above them. And I even this week here have had meetings to that effect. These are people who absolutely are the determiners of outcomes. And some of them are very, very good and noble. Some of them have agendas and that they are kind of bootstrapped to agendas, but it's a very weird space to navigate, I can tell you. Bottom line is the New Earth Nation is what I'm driving toward right now, which is to establish the full universal trust. I've got the best law, I don't mean legal, but law brains, be way beyond legal brains on the team, and economics brains and digital masters. People understand the domain of encryption and the mastery of encryption way beyond the playground that we see out there. So we are going to be not seeking permission, not bending the knee to Caesar or anyone. We will be pronouncing, proclaiming New Earth Nation shortly, and it will be the highest jurisdiction on the face of the earth. And once we've accomplished that, and if I got shot tomorrow, it would still happen incidentally. So that's the really good news for me.
Can you break down a couple points from this? So I've looked into this a little bit, but it's so deep, and I can never get my head around it enough. There's certain domains, there's dominions of the sky, of the land, of the sea, of that. Does this kind of fall into this, and where does the New Earth Project kind of land in that? I mean,
So
how does that work?
That's the dominion there.
Okay.
That is the true jurisdiction.
All right, explain what that is.
That is God King jurisdiction. That is sons and daughters of God. That is Creator. That is the I am, the flame of the I am.
Okay.
So let's be crystal clear. This I am steered this soul plasma into this 3D mortal temporal expression. I am master and commander of this life, of this world, of this entire field of expression. I am. But I am only when I know it, and only when I stand directly under central sun in the white hot flame of pure truth, where you cast no shadow standing under central sun. It burns like hell at first because it burns away the detritus. It burns away the lies, the deceptions, the vagaries, the shadows, the doubts. And once we're standing in pure truth within self, any good grandmother will tell you this. You arrive at a given point in life when the I am emerges, and you're not afraid of the government or the police or the Catholic Church or the local burglar. You're not afraid of anything. And a very unique plasma field emerges around you. This is where the hyperdimensional physics actually kicks in. And that plasma field is what I would loosely coin as the Christed mantle. And the Christed mantle is what we all seek. It is our way home. We all seek enlightenment. We all seek a return to Alpha Omega. We all seek and crave pure expression, limitless joy, affirmation, ecstasy. It's why we all jack off to pornography and snort cocaine, to get these quick fixes and adrenal.
We don't all do that, just saying.
Well, no, I don't, you don't, we don't. Forgive me, I'm being a bit reductive. But the point is that most of humanity, it would seem to me, are variously led by addictions and appetites precisely because they're seeking to fulfill the void. And the void can only be filled with the I am, with the actualized relationship with self. And once that comes about, you don't take the knee to the local corrupt policeman or to the justice or to the anyone. And life changes course as well, because you start to become the determiner of the outcome. Because when we move into coherence with self and we stand beneath a central sun, a phenomenon occurs, and this Christed mantle activates. This is the master, the message of the master Jesus. Of all the great prophets have said the same thing. All great masters speak to the same unity consciousness phenomenon, that when we stand in pure truth within self, we activate coherence with the divine. The divine then marries the immanent template of perfection, of the angelic, back to us, and we become now the sons and daughters of God who will and can and must define all outcomes in this world. And our foundational remit is to anchor heaven to this earth, to reveal the kingdom of heaven on earth. We first have to do that by recognizing the witchery and the bedevilment of the false light matrix that self-reveals, self-fulfills, and self-exists out there by virtue of our abdicating our sovereignty and our divinity. So we must now learn the craft of restitution, restoration, and bringing ourselves back to ourselves, unafraid of the consequence. The consequences already happened. The people who were foolish enough to roll sleeves up or abnegated their highest conscience or instinct sufficiently to have synthetic molecules pumped into their arm, no disrespect to people who did it, but I'm not retroactively speaking to the fact that many of us fell victim to the thrall of the devil when we were urged by this satanic construct called government and the Public Health Administration to roll our sleeves up and receive the mark of the beast. And it was the mark of the beast. That's not to say we can't absolve it and redeem it and transmute it. We can. We are Christed ones. We are the angelics. We have all the power of the universe at our disposal, but only once we rid ourselves of the false light. And we have to do it as acts of consciousness. So the new earth is the ground floor of that reconstitution of sovereign expression, where we say we're taking back title of the soil, we're removing the federal liens and all the invisible liens against the land that we think we own, because you don't own your house, you think you do. You don't own your car, you think you do. You don't own your children, you think you do. You don't own anything. You don't even own your own teeth. Everything is owned by the crown, by Cronus, by the state. You've contracted it. You were volunteered into it with the birth registration certification. You are owned lock, stock, and barrel by Washington District of Columbia, which passes you on through its clearinghouse, the U.S. Treasury Department, to Londinium, where the crown, Cronus, the crown of England, sorts you out and hurls your value back to the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. And somewhere in the cloisters of the Black Papacy in Rome, your soul is tethered and owned by a fiction, by the demon, by the demiurge. So be clear, it's a vast and seemingly complex story. Actually, it's devastatingly simple. It's about you in the now, prepared or not, to walk and conduct yourself in pure truth and right action.
A question. No, it's very good. A question. I got several actually.
Me too.
There are certain paths people can take to renounce these liens and ties, but if they don't get them all, what I've been finding out is they don't get them all the ducks in a row. They end up in jail. They miss one little piece of paper, they're screwed. Their kids are taken away. So,
That's right.
are you kind of in the how do you say in the school of thought that no, I don't need to do all those things right. I am who I am as of right now. Or do you
Yes.
really believe in getting the paperwork done and making
Great
it
question.
Yeah. Mhm.
Great question, Jeff. And it's actually the perfect question for me because it's a twofold thing. On the one hand, if I move into my highest spiritualized expression, then I absolutely emanate the plasmoid field sufficiently to be able to alchemize reality. But on the other hand, so do I do all the paperwork? No.
Mhm.
I am immensely more powerful than the paperwork. To some extent, doing the paperwork is you taking the knee.
I agree.
However, I will say this. I don't want to be the Pied Piper that leads people to purgatory or to a prison cell.
Right.
And I'm not out there saying to people, do this, you should do this, you should do that. I'm not doing this. I'm saying this is what I'm doing. This is what we're doing. And we're going to be proving that out. So if people want to take up the template, the blueprint, and move with it, delightful. But that's where we're headed. And I'm lucky that I've consolidated a very broad, very wide and somewhat enlightened network and movement around the world. And I mean all around the world. So I know that we've got the inertia of the collective and in the gestalt to be able to alchemize an incredible, almost magic wand scenario, which will happen in the next 36 to 48 months. So by the year, we're now 2024. I'd say by midpoint 25, we will have instituted fully the micronation, so to speak. I'll go further than that. because I know how to do it. My days political work and diplomatic work, and certainly within the belly of the United Nations at some point, I understand about multilateral treaties. I understand about these global compacts and about how I can personally sit down with a number of heads of state and invite them to treaty the recognition of the status of the new Earth nation. I could do that, probably take me 3 weeks and a few $1,000s flying around. So I know how to do that. And I know which leaders I can approach and which I can't. You have to have 3 nations in joining a treaty before you can be brought forth onto the floor of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And then once you're on the floor of the General Assembly of the UN, you can then speak to the world, because they're all congregated there, all the world leaders. And you can say, hey, we've got this great idea. How do you all feel about it? Then they can vote yes or no. Then all of a sudden you're a thing on the international playing field. So there are ways and ways of getting your agenda brought forth before the world in the right way. But I intend to play that game moving forward, to be sure. But I don't want to do anything as an act of war. And that's the key piece here. Everything that we do must be an act of peace.
Isn't a declaration of independence an act of war to many organizations and countries?
Only to psychopathy. And if they're psychopaths, then pull out your $200 million guns in Middle America and shoot them dead.
But
So
they may be that, though.
Well, of course they may be that. You might also get hit by an asteroid in the next 3 seconds. But
the reason is the United States declared independence to Great Britain, and they took that as a declaration of war.
Yeah.
And so as an individual says, I declare myself sovereign of this nation or of this nation state, then they may take that as a declaration of war.
Jeff, those kind of hawks will doubtless be profoundly offended and affected by this, and be adversely so, and want to take some kind of action. They don't have the power to do so. They don't have their finger on a trigger, or even on a nuclear button for that matter, any longer. So Vladimir Putin has taken containment of that capacity, and the elements in China as well. There are big moves going on in the Babylonian basement that preclude Joseph gibbering sock puppet Biden or any of his troglodytes to be able to action anything against the sovereigns. There are over, I understand it, between 2.5 and 3 million state nationals now already in the United States. That means that 1% of America has already woken up and revoked, redacted, rescinded, and retracted their contracts, are not paying taxes, and are able to move freely unmolested. And if a policeman does stop you, that policeman, if he's a corrupt policeman, he's required to run your numbers on the central server. Once he sees that he has no containment and no jurisdiction over you, he has to walk away very quickly.
Right.
Now, I've seen that play out in real time. It happened on my tour, my last tour, where one of my crew died in the hotel room. And later that evening, we got back to the hotel to discover the police still standing outside his room. We'd been on stage. We got back to the hotel. The police were still at the hotel, standing outside his room. They hadn't even crossed the threshold. And we asked them why. We said, is there going to be an investigation? Are we in some kind of trouble because we were late in reporting the dead body? What? And they said, no, we have no jurisdiction over this man. We're waiting for you to inform you that you are his nearest and dearest now. You have to contact his family. You have to get a private coroner. You have to dispatch the body. We are not allowed to touch it. And he was the man on our tour who was teaching the sovereignty method and metric on the tour. So, I've seen real time how it plays out. I've also had that myself with police multiple times. I carry around a badge from the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, and I've spoken to police in multiple countries using that badge. And if you know how to conduct yourself, Jeff, you can more or less navigate anything. It's difficult if you're in Sudan, or actually I was there recently and I didn't have problems, but you could be in some countries and get a bullet in the head and be found in the desert, to be sure. So one has to be very judicious the way you pretend that being a sovereign. One very dear friend of mine right here in Sedona last year had her leg broken by a policeman because she got stopped and out the window of the car tried to, claim her sovereignty in the wrong way, and ended up being dragged out of the car and had a leg broken. So of course she can now sue the son of a bitch, and should do. But you're right to be cautious about it.
I have a question. I've heard about this. It actually in Arizona, it's starting to gain steam for sure. How would one go about to make this proclamation, or what is the proper way of doing it in a legitimate way, not just saying, "Hey, or do you just saying it? Is there any?
So, John, I don't want to give too much of my game away because I'm only making the announcement, the reveal at the end of my tour on the 18th
Okay.
of May. But I'll tell you this much. I would be very happy to assemble 3 talking heads, the highest in law and economics, and with you guys and me be there. And we could actually go into this for a proper session because it's a very, very important subject. It's one that's going to become, I think, the biggest subject on the planet in the next 24 to 36 months. Once people realize that there was always an escape route, there was always a get out of jail free card. We never needed to pay $1 in tax
Because there's
personally.
people I met in Arizona that are doing exactly that.
Yeah,
Yeah, as you're saying, there's like some couple million now in the United States. So
that's right.
Mhm.
That's right. Exactly.
oh, definitely put that together. I definitely want to hear more when you're ready for that. That's very interesting. Greg, you had a question a little while back. I want to make sure that you're
Yeah,
able-
well, Sasha was talking about we are going to accomplish certain things by mid 2025. And so the things you were talking about, establishing sovereignty and things like that, and not abolishing the IRS sound kind of, I've talked about the plan. You didn't mention those words. So is this something that's going to be happening like with this group of people, the military and so on? Or is this something is we mean just you and your group? I was a little curious
Okay,
to establish that.
fine. That's a fine question. So no, I'm not representing some great nebulous cloud of military intelligence objectives. I'm simply representing my own microcosmic ecosystem, which is very connected in information relay between various intelligence, military intelligence, and economics and legal minds. But we're taking this forward because we know how to do it, and we know how to do it using the highest expressions of law and the highest jurisdictions. So, and we're doing it because it has to happen now, and because, frankly, this eclipse of the 8th of April, 2024, was the starting gun. That was the starting gun.
Why is that?
Well, if you understand that this eclipse, total eclipse, traversed North America and passed directly over 7 towns called Salem. Called Nineveh.
Yes.
Then there's only 7 towns called Nineveh.
Judgment.
And the last total eclipse in 2017 that passed over North America from Canada into the US passed over 7 towns known as Salem. And there's only 7 towns known as Salem.
Salem means peace.
Yeah, and the
Shalom.
thing started off in a place called Little Egypt and ended in a place called Rapture. So this is stuff known to the ancients and to the Masonic elements back in the day, hundreds of years ago. This date line of the 8th of April, 2024 was predicted 14,000 years ago and is in the Bible. I stated a month before it happened that it was the most important cosmic event in 5,000 years. I was corrected by Dr. Alex Ling, who said it's the most important event in 7,000 years. He flew in to Mexico. I met him in Torreon, out a 3 hours flight outside of Mexico City. Torreon is the town closest to a place called the Zone of Silence, the epicenter, the navel of the paramagnetic Earth, as it related to this total eclipse of the sun that just happened. And we wanted to be there directly under central sun at midday when the eclipse was in its highest, which was 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 28.1 seconds, something like that. And we went there into the desert, off-road, with shaman and scientists. And we did ceremony there on that day. And the cloud bank was black the whole day. So people of Mexico in that part of the world said it's never happened in history. This is always completely clear clouds, not even nothing in the sky. And yet for 3 days leading up to the eclipse, geoengineering had fomented this cloud bank, which was impenetrable. So on the day, we're in the desert, in the zone of silence, NASA trucks everywhere, militarized stuff going on. These devils are doing their own stuff. because the ionosphere is changing shape on that day at that time. As the sun was going into total eclipse, those devils knew that the electrons were being pulled further apart in a lattice work than ever before in 7,000 years, thinning the veil between worlds. So they were conducting their Sabbatean experimental shit, and we were there as a counterpoint to it with our feathered shaman in the desert, and we punched a hole through the cloud that was massive in a ceremony and remained for 5 hours, that hole. It was the only hole in the cloud cover, and we witnessed the full eclipse, albeit we didn't look at it with our eyes. We were conducting a ceremony to go inward and touch the central sun and reinstall the software of the imagining. Rudolf Steiner put it best when he said that the sun puts out trillions and trillions of fibrils, tentacles, rays that come down and touch all living systems. And human beings are the highest form of expression in the temporal realm. Here we are on the surface of the earth, and our imaginings, our dreaming and our ideas, our thoughts, our imaginings are the most powerful and vital thing. And we, as we think or dream or imagine, these fibrils come literally, energetic tentacles come off our heads like rays and move up in toward the sun. And every ray of the sun has a counterpoint ray that comes off a human imaginarium. It's a beautiful thing. It's a symbiosis that creates a feedback loop. Humans drive reality. We drive the cosmos. Our dreaming and imagining manifests reality. Steiner knew that back in the day. So we also know that latter-day shaman and people who are connected to the powers and the mysteries of the earth and the guardians of the sky, we're connected to the elementals. We all know the same logic, and we simply key into it when we're not trying to buy Porsches and Lamborghinis and jack off in Monte Carlo, at the casino tables. We're not playing in the false light matrix, but getting real with ourselves and with our birthright. We learn this stuff. And there we were, and I witnessed it. Again, it's not the first or most magical thing I've witnessed. I've been with so many oracles and medicine men and shaman over the last 25 plus years. I've seen magical, mysterious things, but that was important on that day because it was the thinning of the veil.
And question on that. Okay, go ahead and finish.
That was the starting gun. Okay. That was the starting gun. That's the point I'm trying to make. That 4 minutes, 28.1 seconds of total eclipse of the sun was the starting gun for the revelation and the rapture, and they're two sides of the same coin.
The question I have is do you believe that the people, I don't know who, ancient occultists or some sort, you were mentioning the Masons and that, when they organized the cities, that they were lining it up for this event, the names, or do you think it's just the nature of, I don't know.
No, it was clearly,
yeah.
No, it was clearly predictive and clearly prescriptive, and we know that it's a forensic evidence. The lines that crisscrossed on North America became the Alpha Omega symbol, and the Alpha Omega symbol written on the surface of North America was predicted in the biblical prophecies as being the signature of God. So when the signature of God is writ upon the Americas, that is when you will know the revelation.
That's the path of this eclipse and the path of the one 7 years ago made this shape. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, they both, and one's Nineveh, one's Salem. If you understand Nineveh, that's connected to Jonah being swallowed by the whale for 3 days and nights, and then being spat out, having to go to Nineveh to tell the people of Nineveh to atone. They had 40 days to atone, to repent, or else.
I'm of the understanding recently that Nineveh also had an eclipse similar to this just before Jonah appeared, and so they knew that there was some kind of an issue going on, and that they needed to that there was going to be judgment. So when Jonah came, they just heard they were open to him. They wouldn't normally have been open to him, but
and that's why I'm here doing this tour. I'm doing a 40 days of atonement tour, and kicked off in the zone of silence, central sun. And 40 days later is the 18th into the 19th of May, which is the culmination of my tour when I'm doing the reveal on the micronation. Yeah. And until then, about atonement. And
so
repentance.
Definitely you believe it's a prophecy that than planned. That was kind of the best way I was.
They're both the same thing, Jeff.
Okay, but the individuals. Okay, but the individuals that named the city. Do you? My question is: I'm wondering, did somebody plan for this event to happen other than the spiritual realm?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did, and they still do to this day. So you have these you have these very enigmatic figures. I refer to them as the Babylonian priesthood. And to be fair, and to temper my language and my temper somewhat, I need to say that it's not good or bad. It's both good and bad. It's the checkerboard of the kingdom of the devil, in a sense. It's the black and white chessboard of the Masons. And it is understanding the realm of duality and how we navigate the dualistic realms in order to transmute and transcend into the elixir, the ambrosia, the diamond in the coal, which is what the Adamite is. We are the Adamite. We are the Adam, which is diamantine, which is the diamond born of the coal of the earth. So, it's both things. It was prophesied. Some of the people back in the day who were designing the layout of the streets and building roads of Salem and Nineveh, those towns, wouldn't have had the faintest idea. 99.9% of people would just follow orders. That's what humans are attuned to doing. We follow orders. That's our great folly. And when we stop following orders and start following the dictate of conscience and instinct, we'll start to reveal the kingdom of heaven on earth. But for thousands of years, certainly for many centuries, we have simply done what we've been told to do. So the short answer is a very, very select few, Jeffrey, would have known what they were designing back in the day. And it would have been undertaken by the worker ants.
Makes sense. Now, the
Question about the
yeah. Well, really quick, I'll make one mention also on Nineveh. There's also, and Jordan Peterson unpacks this really interesting. Nineveh has really associated with having an obligation to say something, and if you don't, then that's when the real consequences come. Not only are you thrown over into the water, but you're also eaten by the whale, which equates to hell, and it just keeps getting worse and worse when you are asked and required to say something true and you don't do it. And we're kind of in that world right now, don't you think?
Beautifully stated. Couldn't have put it better myself. And yes, and that's where the exigency exists. That's where the urgency exists, in that sense of pure truth and right action. And it becomes our greatest protection as well. That's the crushing irony. People are so mind-fucked and cult programmed into thinking, especially in Middle America, to think that, we step out of the box, we're going to get bushwhacked. Yeah, that's been true hitherto. Now step out the box and really put yourself on the line, and you activate your Christed mantle. That becomes your protection. That becomes your cloak as you walk as Daniel through the lion's den. It becomes your protection as you navigate the shadow in the valley of death.
Greg, you had a question.
I just have a question about your perspective on things, and I guess I'd like to delve into the ceremony itself, but bigger question than that is, from where I look at things, I see spiritual warfare as being something that we need to engage in. And it seems to me that right now, the spiritual warfare is more intense than it's ever been. And, a lot of times we don't even know who the enemy is. And it sounds to me, Sacha, that you have a better sense of who the enemy really is than most of us have. And you talked about, the queens and the people at the very top are not really the ones we need to worry about. It's that next layer, that slippery layer. You talked about that, and you can name names and say who some of these people are. And, some of us dummies don't even know who those people are, but we know that there is spiritual wickedness in high places. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you talk about things need to be done peacefully, and yet we are very much, in my opinion, at war. And it seems to me this eclipse, if you're doing the ceremony for good, aren't these same people doing something similar for their own ends? Isn't there spiritual warfare going on with these events?
Yes, they are, and always have done. But that's changing, and it's shifting for a host of different reasons, not least because we are moving through the galaxy and the plane. Having traversed the ecliptic, we are moving through a band of hyperdimensional vibral light. This is the benediction that occurs every semi-arc of the grand procession of the equinox. We move through this photon band. It's a kind of an audit that's being done at the cosmic level, where that vibratory...
You're talking about the 26,000 year thing?
Yes. You cut that in half into 13,000 year sections, and every quarter forgive me, every semi-arc we pass through. So from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m., we're moving through the galactic day. And then from 3 p.m. to 9 a.m., we're moving through the galactic night. But as you move to 9 a.m. or to 3 p.m., you are literally traversing a photon band, a cloud of vibral light that is evidenced there. And as we impact that, it takes a couple of hundred years to pass through it. But as we impact that photon band, so to speak, it enlightens all of manifest creation from the inside out by penetrating. There's a subatomic vibral light particulate comes into every atom, every cell, and enlightens us. It conducts an audit as well of where do we stand in the scheme of things on the spiral of ascension. 13,000 years ago, that audit was done of all living systems in our world, and we failed because we effectively fed back to the sun that we wanted to continue playing with the fallen light of Atlantis. And so we were allowed a semi-arc, galactic sleep of the last 13,000 years, which was diabolical and extreme, but necessary for the fulmination of our soul, the fabric of our soul, to go to the next level. In the whole Age of Aquarius thing, the whole hippy dippy shit thing, the whole 21st of December 2012 and 2020, all of that speaks to the fact that we've hit this kind of nexus point in that upshift on that 9 a.m. And we've passed muster. So we've had that audit done again to us, and we've actually passed muster for the first time in the history of time. And by history of time, I'm talking about 954 billion years, not 13.x billion years, popularly misconstrued. So it's now a point at which we've passed muster with the galactic audit, and now we've given it time to separate the wheat from the chaff. And we're doing that. It's exactly what's happening. So when you speak, Greg, about forces of evil and acts of war, I would simply caution that that's part of the old vernacular that we have to, each of us, seriously reassess, because I do not see it as an act of war. And I do not see Bill Gates, motherfucker that he is, I do not see that piece of shit, turgid subhuman as being anything other than a perfect counterpoint geometry in the now. Representing what? Representing the unresolved aspects of you and me and our various incarnations. So whatever manifests on the screen of life is perfectly appointed, perfectly anointed. Now, if we're serious about wanting to eradicate that element of subhuman, draconian force and element, we can do so, but we have to steer it through wise dreaming and through changing and shifting the entire psychometry of who and what we think we are. We are not little humans shuffling around with a vote and a gun and a pitchfork and a Bible. We are the avatars. We are the sons and daughters of God. We contain the entire majesty of the Creator as a fractal, each one of us. And we are on the threshold of that revelation being remembered to us. But if we want to enjoy the process, we can step into that flame even sooner individually and enjoy the ride that's coming. Because the ride that's coming between now and 2032 is immensely powerful, immensely disturbing to people who are operating at frequency X and below. People who are operating at the vibratory frequency X, heart frequency and above, are going to be enjoying the process variously. The more and the higher you're vibrating in that peace and love frequency, so to speak, the empathic frequency, the compassionate empathic frequency, the frequency that is determined through the principle of I am that thou art. I feel your pain. I forgive you. I love you. If we are carrying that as the ground of our existence, as the frequency, the tone into life, the road rises up to meet us, the ocean parts, and we're received. That is just the way reality actually works. If we carry the act of war with us, if we are not, and which is to say fear, then we are literally creating a counterpoint frequency and we're attuning it back to us in a feedback loop. So no, those draconian elements have no. Greg, I'm one of those people who's had a gun at the head and had the thing pulled and nothing leaves the chamber. Now, that happened a long time ago. In one
Wow.
incident, I was being attempted, I guess, to be taken out. And what I learned on that day was that looking at the scared face of this North African soldier or military, whoever had been sent to pull the trigger, what I saw in his face, in his eyes, was a child. He was a bit younger than me, must have been 24, 25, maybe 26. And he was terrified. And his function was to go wait until 3 a.m. for me outside a safe house where I was being put up. And before I got from the gate to the door of the safe house, come out of the shadows, put a gun, pull the trigger, and then leave under cover of darkness. And that could and would have happened.
Wow.
And should have happened. And had I been carrying the wrong frequency, it absolutely would have happened. And it should have. It would be correct geometry. But on that particular evening, it's a beautiful evening. And as that happened, and he comes out of the shadow, and there's things up in my head, and I'm looking at him, and his face is very close to mine, and I see abject fear in his eyes. And my response to that was to smile with compassion, like, it's okay. And the smile that came on my face triggered in him a smile that came out very weird, like it was a weird look on his face, but he was trying to reciprocate in a human-to-human way, because that was the instinct in him. To also respond to that. And I decommissioned the gun, but he'd pulled the trigger. It just hadn't gone. And I learned that that is how it works. And I've had other incidents with guns at the head so that I could speak to them. I'm not going to bore you with them. But what I've observed firsthand is that we determine the outcome absolutely categorically.
You said something that just, and you're going to laugh because it's probably not the word you expected that would really trigger me, but you said the word fractal. And that really triggered me.
Oh, here we go.
I'm thinking, now I don't want to get into physics. Oh, I do want to get into physics, but I won't. But anyway, I'm just thinking, you know, how every cell in your body has complete all the DNA about you. You could grow yourself just from that one cell. And then a fractal, by definition, all the information in a given, you know, in a given thing is also contained in the same thing. If you know, in the group of things, or if you move out the picture, it's still the same. So I hadn't never thought of it that way before, but you're saying we're a fractal of God. So everything that God has, we have in completely. Is that what you were saying? I just want to
that's MSET.
That I never thought of it that way.
Greg, Z equals Z squared plus C. That's the equation. It's MSET mathematics. It's pure form fractal geometry. It's
that is the essence of my definition of entropy. But we'll save that for another day.
Oh, I would love that conversation.
Yeah,
I would
that
love
is
that.
a good. Yeah, good. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was saying I personally love to have that conversation. You know, it's powerful stuff. I can only speak to my own truth. I can only speak to what I've learned and seen with these God-given senses. Mm-hmm. And it is that there is nothing out there to fear. I mean, even last week alone, I was having encrypted messages and phone calls saying, I'm in very, very serious danger. Please stop doing what I'm doing. Go and hide away. I've had warnings from government officials. In 2016, quite famously now, didn't pay attention to the former defense minister of Lithuania, who apprehended me in Vilnius on the eve of my address to the parliament there, and said, you're staying in a safe house, go home, you're in deep trouble. You must address the parliament in the morning, and then Sacha disappear for 6 months. You are on the security screens in a bad way. And I didn't pay attention. And 3 days later, I went on a speaking tour in Scandinavia. And 3 days later, I was microwaved and almost killed. It took me 3 months to recover. So I know how, you know, I didn't listen to my deepest instinct at that time. And yet it was my deepest instinct, because even though I threw myself stupidly in front of a bus and got poisoned, a radiation poisoning, which seriously took me down for 3 months, it taught me so much. What happened to me that I made the film 5G Apocalypse, the extinction event, based on my experience. Just one moment. My producer's here. Ali, I know. I'm so sorry. I've got Hopi elders and messengers waiting for me not far from here. I'm supposed to go into Hopi land with them right now on a very special visit. And I've been given very special permissions to film.
It's been an honor having you as long as we did. So,
well, I would love to have another conversation, because being triangulated by three brilliant minds, for me, is my idea of a lot of fun.
So many questions we didn't get to ask. So yeah, I'd love to ask.
We can do a part 2.
I'm down for a part two next week or the
Okay.
week after. I'm on the road for the next month in the US, and I've got my my satellite rig. So happy to jump in anytime.
Okay.
It's really a
Great.
pleasure. It was great meeting you. It's much better to talk with you one on one rather than watching the video. I've gotten to understand you a lot, your approach a lot better. And I really thank you. And definitely, if you want to do it again in a few weeks, we'd be happy to have you again.
100%. I'm down. Set
All
the
right.
date. Stream. I'm good.
Okay.
And John, Greg, Jeffrey, lovely meeting you guys. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too. Have a
Wonderful.
good day.
Thank you so much.